about Jesus. We are talking about Jesus. I had to. I told him I'd do it. I just cracked my knuckles.
I just had to do it to him.
Just gotta do it to him. I only know how to do it to him. Hi, welcome to Call to the Table, the podcast where Caroline just looks at me and says, let's go. I'm Olivia. I don't have notes, I just have opinions.
I'm John. I'm the tall one.
I'm Jordan.
Does not relate to anything I just did.
I know.
I'm Jordan. I have notes and opinions.
Hey.
Hey.
I'm Caroline, and all of my notes are completely objective, so everything I say is 100% true. Ignore all of these guys.
Oh.
Thanks, Caroline.
I'd like to call my lawyer.
What lawyer?
Hey, we were talking about opinions, so it's like, hey, I gotta be the exact opposite.
Okay, I guess.
Okay. Alright, so today we are talking about accountability within the church. And so the first thing I want to set the stage with is when we say accountability in the church, what do we mean? Live.
And she's referencing her not
I don't have
notes.
notes, I have opinions. Can we not start with me?
Why?
That's okay.
Because I don't know, like, accountability in the church, like, what's the level of accountability that we actually have within the church? Like, don't start with me.
Okay. I'll start with John.
Start with John. I'll be
start
at
with
the end.
John.
I personally believe accountability within the church is a balance between the congregation and the leadership.
Yep.
Okay.
Each one keeps the other accountable.
I said checks and balances for mine. I said it's
Say coffee.
it's the ability to have the congregation be just as involved with the decision making as the higher ups, but at the same time the higher ups are making sure that the congregation doesn't like mutiny.
Yes.
Or just
That's
let
the best
me.
way I can say it.
I know, but I don't know. The idea of a ship just was so funny to me.
It's the best thing I can say.
Arg, pastor! We can't have you anymore! Shanghai the pastor!
I take one sip of my coffee and everything just goes crazy.
Are you sure that was just coffee in there?
Yes. I made it myself.
From my special blend.
But you weren't always around it.
Yes, I was. I made it my French press. I made it myself.
No, I'm talking about when you walked away. I could have slipped a little something in there.
Oh,
I didn't, but I could have.
I'm gonna go and call my lawyers really quick.
Again, what lawyers are you talking about?
All right, Caroline.
Lawyer birds.
Your
What about you?
imaginary ones?
John.
So...
John.
Papa! I basically said the same thing. People taking responsibility for their actions and their jobs that they have. People keeping other people accountable for either doing or not doing their job, but that also goes for their own life actions, like if they want to have accountability partners for certain things. And I'm not just talking about, like, if they have an addiction or whatever. It could be, hey, I wanted to make sure I did enough exercise this week, or I wanted to make sure I was keeping on track with reading my Bible or doing devotions or something like that. Like, people keeping each other accountable in that way. Although, of course, accountability in church leadership is a huge thing. See what I said? Yeah, people can go to other people about their problems. Oh, people admitting when they're wrong. That's a big thing as well. Because I feel like because people have the wrong idea about people supposing, like, church is a place for broken people. Not perfect people. The problem is, because of legalism and other things, people get the idea that you need to be perfect when you step into the church, and so it's really hard to admit your mistakes, particularly if you're in a place of power or privilege. And I feel like there are a lot of pastors out there, and not just pastors, but anybody with an amount of influence in the church. When they screw up, either in a small or a big way, it's very hard for them to come back from that and say, yeah, my bad. And I want to come back from that. And that's why we get scandals that the news just loves showing, painting the Christian church as a whole as awful because these few people decided to do terrible things to a child, which tends to be what we hear about in the news. So, or money laundering, or... but that's the prosperity gospel stuff. So,
yeah, see, I took that question a whole different way, and that's why I didn't want to answer
that's
first.
great, though.
Because when you ask, like, when we say accountability in church, what do we mean? I have a hard time even seeing accountability within the church. I've been in so many different churches where I'm like, I don't know who's allowed to say what and, what kind of accountability.
Yeah.
So it's like, my perspective is what accountability in the church?
Yeah.
Like, where is it? Like, I haven't personally, I mean, there's been some churches where I've seen it. I'm not going to say, like, every church I've been to, my chair is squeaky.
It's okay.
That's okay.
Great.
So is mine.
So
I like my squeaky chair. But, like, 95% of the churches I have been to, I see things, or, maybe not even churches, but, like, organized religional spaces. Yeah. I'm like, it's my job as, like, the congregation to address something and allow, to hold accountable my leaders. But if they're not willing to hear it, like, why even say anything? Why have a voice? So
that was something me and John got to talking about, because one of the cool things that our church did, and the church we specifically go to is a satellite campus. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the stuff that the main campus deals with, we don't necessarily have a connection with, because we're down here and they're up in, they're a couple hours away.
They're a couple hours away, yeah.
So, but one of the things
you
that
don't
our
drive
church...
a couple hours to get to church?
No, the main campus is a couple hours away.
We go to the smaller one.
No, I know.
We go to the smaller
How
one's
dare
like
you
5
not
minutes down
drive
the road.
a couple hours to go to church?
But
just kidding.
I'm so religious.
I'm
my
just
church
kidding.
is in California.
There you
And
go.
I drive there every weekend.
I'm just kidding.
No.
I like satellite churches a lot.
But our church, the cool thing that they did last year was it came to the point where we could have bought the building we were in, because we were renting it, and somebody else wanted to buy it. And so we either could have bought it or could have found a new place. Well, instead of our pastor and our leaders going and just talking about it with the main campus, who has really nothing to do with our satellite campus, they sent out an email and said, we're going to have a special meeting after church. We'll explain what it is when you get there. If you want to come, you're welcome to come. If you don't come, that's fine. But you just need to know, like, we're going to be talking about something. And then after church, he sat down with the congregation, told what the situation was, and he was like, I don't want to just stand, I want to hear y'all's feedback. I want to hear y'all's questions. I want to hear y'all's concerns. And we had probably an hour-long meeting where he went to the congregation and was like, I'm not going to make a decision until A, y'all vote on what the decision is, and B, y'all show that we can actually do this, because that involves money, and of course then that's the congregation's job to make sure that can get paid. So John and I got talking about that last night. That was a huge thing for them not to just go and make that decision and then tell the congregation. The congregation had a direct say in what was going on, and I think that's a great example of accountability.
Absolutely.
But you don't see that a lot. I mean, Liv, you're right on that's not done a whole lot.
I mean, that's the proof of a good leader.
Yeah.
Like, that just shows you, like, the difference between, there's that diagram of, like, a boss is just climbing and people are pushing that boss up. A leader is behind everyone, hoisting the people up. So, like, and we don't see that in church enough, even though it's biblical. We don't see it in the church. It becomes this. There's a lot of pride that gets in the way. There's a lot of egos that get in the way.
Amen.
And it's difficult for people to hear, oh, I'm wrong, or it's difficult for people to say, oh, I have a chance to, like, let everyone help me make this decision, but I'm the leader. I should be making these decisions. Like, no.
Yeah.
Like, that's why you have people holding you accountable. That's why organizations have employees. That's why churches have elders and congregations. I could keep going, but John wants to talk. He keeps looking at me with the eyes.
Well,
shut up.
It's because I'm trying to piggyback off what she said.
I was just piggybacking off what she said.
I know, but it's more into her to think. But the big thing, like, with
Why
that
does
hour...
everyone have glitter on their face? Like, you have a piece of glitter right here. You have a piece of glitter like right here.
What?
You have glitter like right
I'm
here.
magical.
You have glitter
You and me
on your
both,
face.
Caroline.
What crafts are you doing?
Nothing. I don't keep glitter in this
I
house.
was asking John. Sorry. What crafts are you doing?
I must have had a fight with a fairy in my dreams last night. One or something. I don't know.
I don't know. But,
it's interrupting number one.
yes.
I'm going to keep a tally.
But, with that hour-long meeting, about 45 minutes of it was the congregation standing up and saying, we like this place. We want to keep this place, but we also need to know if we do buy this place, are we going to be able to do X, Y, and Z?
Right.
And all that got addressed, and very well, actually. And it seems like we've actually got extra money now, if I remember right, to where we can start doing those projects.
Yeah. We have projects that the church, the not donations, but like the payments toward the church fund has been so overwhelming that now we have stuff that needs to get done outside of just paying off the building. We have extra money to do that, which is really, really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we've already kind of started going into this, but what are we seeing is the current form of accountability? Like, we know that there are some things, for me, I'm going to kind of interject mine right here. What I see most of the time is that the higher-ups kind of keep each other accountable, but that may also mean that they're colluding with each other.
They're colluding and playing politics against
right.
each other.
They're allowing, if one person isn't being truly truthful,
right,
it's just spreading like gangrene.
So I'm seeing like that, but the congregation is not then involved with the accountability. So that's what I would say. What are you seeing as the current form?
So, I don't know. I'm just thinking about the churches that I've been to, and the only thing that I've really been thinking about as far as accountability goes is making sure that we are all in line with doctrine. And I'm not just talking about like denomination-centric stuff. I'm talking about like the pastor actually saying right things in front of the congregation, you know? Because there's a pastor that I know, and sometimes he says these really wacky things, and they're not always about like mainstream, like every Christian definitely agrees on this thing, you know, like about the crucifixion and Jesus raising from the dead and salvation. Like, that's different. But he'll say some things that kind of, sometimes it's about the character of God, sometimes it's about things that are blatantly in Scripture, and it's like, where did you get that idea from? Here's an example. One time he was talking about the wise men, and it was during Christmas, and he talks about like the wise men performing black magic, and I'm like, what? If they were actively searching the Scriptures to find Jesus, because that must be the only way, you know, aside from having revelations from God, that they knew to go looking for the born Messiah in the first place, what makes you think they were actively communicating with the devil? You know, and this pastor has also said a similar thing regarding Daniel, and that when he was brought into the court of Nebuchadnezzar, he was taught this stuff, and I was like, no, because it specifically mentions in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it talks about all the different people that he brought to him, which included wise men, Chaldeans, sorcerers, magicians. So there are people that are all in all these different ways, and I'm thinking Daniel was a wise man and not a sorcerer, you know? So it's just like, these people who, you know God actively do not do black magic, and I'm very, very wondering what you are doing.
I was just telling our viewers at the current moment that
we are recording what we're recording.
Accountability, and if they wanted to ask any questions, they had time to shoot me a question. I meant to do it right before we were starting.
It's okay, I just wasn't sure what to make of your face.
I felt guilty that I was like listening.
No,
I
thought, girl, I'm sorry. I interpreted that as, actually, I found something that has contradicted what she is saying, and so I'm going to talk about it. I'm sorry. I saw the panic in your eyes, and so that's where my brain went.
I think I was being disrespectful, but I just wanted to make sure that.
Heavens no.
I meant to do it right before, so like each time we talk, like I'm gonna.
I mean, I do think that's a good thing that our viewers need to know that.
Yeah.
You know,
because this was the topic we were kind of bouncing back and forth on.
So. Yeah. So
shooting that question.
I'm going to take Liv's job here again, where I ask questions.
Why am I always the one being interrogated?
No.
I've been interrogated.
Because you're the one who's always right.
Yeah, according to your intro.
According to my lawyers.
You're going to keep going on about this lawyer thing.
Yeah, it's going to be my theme.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So, I have a question for you. Are you saying that a pastor cannot get up in front of the church and say something that is truly an opinion if he could sit there and if he could sit there and be like, I read this and I took it as da 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 da? Are you saying he can't do that if it doesn't fall in line with doctrine?
Can you explain that just a little bit more? Because, like, I think I get where you're coming from.
So, like, we have case in point, you've sat there and even on the podcast talked about how things that you imagine how heaven will be and stuff that there's no biblical basis for it. It's just stuff that you think. Are you saying that if a pastor sits there and goes, okay, in my devotions this week, I read this verse, and my thought was da-da-da-da, and he has a whole sermon on that, if it doesn't fall in line with necessarily the religion's doctrine?
Okay, so, here, let me clarify my point, and then I'll get to your raised hand, young lady in the beanie.
Why is everyone calling me young lady today? It makes me feel uncomfortable.
How about we call you old lady then?
I'd much rather be called old lady than young lady.
Vieja.
I don't know what that means.
It's old lady in Spanish.
I almost failed Spanish twice.
Frau Olivia.
I almost failed Italian
Frau Olivia.
twice.
I think I like that one better.
My arm's gonna get tired. Go ahead.
Okay, go. Answer the question.
Okay. So, there is
Just
a
don't
big
be forgotten.
difference between saying,
I thought you were gonna
because
thanks.
I read this,
Mm-hmm.
I believe this.
Mm-hmm.
So far, I have not heard this pastor saying that.
Okay.
He just makes statements without facts to back them up.
Okay.
And that is what bothers me, because what I have read contradicts what he says, because when he says things along those lines, it tends to me, put the character of the person in question, sometimes God, in a doubtful light. Because it's like, look, if this, like, it doesn't make sense that you're saying these things, because as a person, why would they be doing that if they are following God? They would be doing something that is different.
That makes sense.
And I don't have, every example of when this particular pastor has said stuff like that. But the few times that I definitely remember, it was just like, this goes against that person's character, as I have read in Scripture, and as I have read in other commentaries and heard from other people as well. So, to me, I'm kind of like, where do we keep accountability for that sort of thing? Because there are always going to be people in a congregation who just come and listen, who don't do the research for themselves. And pastors are supposed to set a standard. I'm not saying they're supposed to be perfect, because we're all broken human people, and God calls broken people to lead through example to Him, you know, to set an example, to say, hey, I'm broken too, let's all do this together. But I really do have high expectations in that what they preach from the pulpit, they need to get from Scripture, you know, and that it needs to be consistent about the character of God and the character of the godly men and women who have come before us. And so I'm just kind of like, who do we go to about these things? Because I have heard some people talking about the things that this pastor says, and they're all sort of like, well, who do we go to about this? You know, because it's like, it's such a delicate matter. And that's kind of where I am in my thoughts on accountability. Like we've been talking about, it's a huge thing, you know. It's such a broad topic, but that's one of my big things. How do we keep people accountable for what they say, what they're supposed to be representing, particularly from the pulpit? Just because that's where I've seen it in a church that I have gone to. But, I mean, there's a whole lot more than that. So, okay, you've put your hand down, but I know you've been patiently waiting.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
You get a cookie.
Go ahead, Liz.
Yay! Peanut butter.
No, it's
butter.
chocolate chip. Just to mess you up.
We'll get you a peanut butter cookie.
Yes.
With chocolate chips. The chocolate chips are peanut butter psych.
Okay, so I have two things, and
Yes.
I hopefully can remember my second one.
Okay. You'll remember once you start talking.
Yeah. My first one.
Did you forget your first one?
Oh no. Oh, I remember. Okay, so my first one was basically kind of like the same thing you were saying, but kind of a little bit different. When a pastor stands up at the pulpit and gives a specific verse, but only says that verse and not the context before and after.
Yes.
That really bothers me, in my
Yes.
opinion, because you can take one verse out of context completely.
Oh, that's what the devil did during the temptation.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know, so yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch, there's an accountability there of like before and after, and if that verse itself, and you're going to go on to an entire sermon about one specific verse, that pastor or that like speaker needs to be able to back up what's before, what's after, and other verses coincide with that. You know what I mean? It's like,
with other verses as well.
exactly. I can sit there and speak to a group of kids, because I've done it before, on one particular topic, but I make sure I have verses coming from all sides of the Bible to make sure what I'm saying isn't just my opinion. Because while I may just give my opinion, I try to back it up with as many facts as possible. You know, I do think about this stuff before I come here. So,
we believe you.
Oh, I know. So yeah, that was my first one, and there was something else that I was going to say. I guess it wasn't as important, so.
John, what are you going to say?
Okay.
Yeah, John, what are you going to say?
With, what is the current...
She's my cherry pie.
I mean, that's a good song, but...
That's two.
That's interruption number 2.
I was planning that one since, Wednesday.
Since the first one?
No, since Wednesday. I was like, I'm going to try to interrupt him. I'm going to use that song. Hopefully we don't get copywritten for it. We won't. It's fine.
Are we moving on to number 2 now?
We are on
We're already on
number
two.
Oh, we are. Oh.
Yeah.
See,
oh,
you
shoot,
completely...
I forgot. I do have,
Notes on that? You
She
have
has notes on that.
okay, well...
Let John finish first. You had your minute.
It's okay. I'm sorry. I just had a
No, it's
not
fine.
blonde
We'll
moment,
come
yeah.
back. We'll come back to you.
Okay,
But let John go.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, currently, from what I've experienced in all the churches I've been to, which has been about 5, you vote in your elders or your deacons, or both, if you have both in your church. The problem with this is people typically don't know the people who are getting nominated, or the nominating process, or anything along those lines.
Or they keep the same people in because they're the only people they know.
Yeah. So, with this, it comes back to the congregation making themselves informed. If you don't know the person, don't vote them in. Because it's actually spelled out in the Bible in 1 Timothy chapter 3. If you ever need to, understand what you're trying to vote for with a deacon or an elder within the church, just go and read it. It's, in there it talks about being a good head of their household, because if they can't keep their household in order, how could they keep the church in order?
Yeah.
And, I am getting this out of a King James version. It might be slightly different in different translations. But you have to get yourself to where you're informed of the people that you're trying to vote on. Because if you're not, you're literally just handing over your power to them. And I've been in a church where people have been fired because they say the congregation should be able to have the same vision that we're going with, not just the vision from the leadership, making everybody go along with it. And that person got fired because they believed in a leadership-based church instead of a congregational leadership balance.
Well, and I'm going to go off of yours, because this is something we talked about last night. I feel like, we've mentioned in another podcast that I don't vote, that I'm, for politics. I think the other part of this goes into, if you are not willing to do the research about or be knowledgeable about what's going on in your church, if the church offers it. Now then that's on the church. That the church has to offer it. But with our church that just bought that property, had we not gone to that meeting, had we chosen to not gone to that meeting, and then we ended up buying the church, I don't have a right to sit there and complain about it because I chose not to go to that. And that's a big reason why I don't vote, is because politics to me weigh me down so much. So if for the people who hang out with me, I very, 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 very rarely ever complain about the leaders of our country because I'm not informed. I didn't vote. So I didn't vote, therefore I don't have a right to complain. If I want to sit there and I want to complain, I'm going to go and I'm going to do the research and I'm going to have a say in who is leading our country. But y'all have been around me enough. Y'all know I don't complain about politics because I don't vote. And so therefore I don't have that right. So I think that's another part of accountability is accountability within yourself as a congregation member. If you're going to sit there and you're going to complain about who's leading the church, then you need to be going and doing something about it.
Right. And most churches are 501c3 nonprofits, meaning they are required by law to have their documents of their board, their financial fiscal years, how much they make, and the leadership of the church as public records.
Yep.
So that information is required by a 501c3 nonprofit to be completely open. So, and that goes with any form of 501c3. I just learned this yesterday. I was like so excited to learn all this stuff.
Neat.
Yeah, my boss at the company I danced for was like, yeah, did you know this, and this? I was like, I had no idea, but I thought this is super dope, so I'm going to listen. Not that I don't listen when I don't think it's dope. I just thought it was really cool.
Like, hey, she's telling me something that's going to happen tomorrow on the podcast.
Yeah, I didn't even think it was going to
it's
correlate until you said
topical.
something.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are required to have documents, and if they don't have certain documents, the red flag usually arises. Why are they hiding that information?
Yep.
You can also look at, like, if take a dance studio for instance. Most dance studios are LLCs. Some dance studios are 501c3s. They have to kind of, share the information of how much are they getting from grants, how much are they getting from donors, like, where's that money coming from, because it is a non-profit.
Yep.
They cannot turn money around and profit off of the money. One of the studios I dance for, or work for, they are, they're 501c3. We don't charge any admission to our, to our shows, because that's profit. That technically is considered a profit.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do that. But if the numbers are slightly skewed, and the numbers are skewed on, like, attendance, and the budgeting is then skewed from tithe, I'm going back to a church aspect, that has to be public knowledge or something. There's a red flag there. So there's the accountability on, leadership again. But I wanted to insert that because it, kind of goes along with, you can educate yourself by going in public records and seeing the 501c3 of a church.
Yeah, of your church.
Okay, I remembered what I was going to say.
What were you going to say? Was that it?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, what were you going to say? So keep going.
I went over my notes and I kind of said my bit, so
okay.
Please.
I was going to ask you, how does, because now it's my turn to ask Caroline questions, how does, the last podcast we did on, the purpose of the church, I spoke about, having more spirit-led leaders than, head knowledge leaders. And we kind of talked about the difference between head knowledge and heart knowledge. While I think a pastor needs to have a theological degree behind them, like that is required by, most all churches, they can have a, I call them master class because I'm a dancer and they're considered master classes to me. A guest speaker who may not have a theological background, may not have a theological degree, but where is that line of, I have a degree, but I'm being led by the Spirit to say, here's my, and this kind of goes against what I just said, like knowing but you got to know what's before and behind.
Right.
But what if, like, you feel led in the Spirit to just talk about one point, elaborate on it, and they feel like that is what the Spirit's leading them to say?
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously,
I know you don't, for the sake of the
podcast. I know, no, I get that.
I gotta insert that every time. For the sake of the podcast.
No, I get that. And I don't know if I should clarify my point anymore, but I guess because of my experience with some pastors, it's what they have brought to the table before the congregation that is either non-scripture based, or I don't know how they got to their conclusions because it's just not there at all.
Right.
That's what I have a problem with. And how I'm wondering, how do we keep these guys accountable? Because if it was in my perfect little world, we would be able to confront those people immediately and go, okay, what happened?
Right.
What's going on?
No passing notes in class.
Because there was like a specific example. there was a gentleman who used to be the pastor of my church a while back, and he would compose entire sermons from those email chains that used to go around that would just tell stories, and I would know what they were because, you know, this was in the early 2000s and people still read those things. And
I never read those. Delete.
Yeah.
I had a slow computer, and I didn't have much to
No
go
offense
by.
to those who did.
So-
I just was like,
No, I got you.
delete.
It's just, and sometimes I'd hear the stories from other people.
Yeah.
So, you know. And I would hear him start going on, and it'd go, I've heard that before. Why are you saying it in church? And the thing is, it's not just using one as an example. The whole sermon would be composed of those.
Right.
And not to spill the tea too much, but when he transferred to another church, I learned years later, children,
I put my foot down, and his foot's in my space.
So I got on her like she got on
he's
the
in my
meat.
bubble.
do we need to put some duct tape on the floor so that way you don't cross a line?
Can we?
Mom, she's touched me with her feet like she complained that I touched her.
You're in my space.
I am
I'm
not
sorry,
your mother, just because I'm the oldest
I
one
love
here.
that they're going to you and not me, and I'm married to him.
Well, she's the one that got
I'm-
onto us.
I'm saying a blanket statement. Mom.
I was doing it because she was the one that was getting on to us.
Gotcha.
He's just
Hey,
got
I'm
long
so-
legs.
No,
They're my
let
wing.
me.
I'm
me
sorry, I'm like a
continue
granddaddy
to-
long legs over here.
Oh, that's even
Yeah,
worse because there's a
seriously.
spider. Why would you do that?
So we learned another thing that squicks out.
I hate
Olivia.
spiders.
Amen, sister.
Okay.
Both y'all do.
So, let me continue with the tea. So, I learned after he had switched states and moved to a different congregation that he actually got in trouble because they found he had plagiarized whole sermons from other people. And just, you know, there's a difference between, I would like to read the sermon today that I heard from so-and-so.
Right.
You know, versus, this is something that I wrote myself.
Right.
And he just, and I don't remember if he got suspended or what, but he got in trouble. And there was a part of my brain that went, I could have told you years ago that this
Right.
would have happened. And it's like, what do we do about that kind of thing, though? Because he wasn't forced to resign from our church. Like,
So-
you know?
Would you say that you felt that you had no voice in your church to hold him
Yes.
accountable?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely because I was a teener. I was a teener. I was
Teeny
a
bopper.
because I was a teenager at that point. No, I just kind of had to hold my angst in and go, yeah, I'm doing the slides for this. Yeah, I know the story you're saying, and it's wrong. And if I had the ability, I would be fixing these slides right now and showing it to the congregation going, what this man is saying is wrong. This is a waste of our time. Blah, blah, blah. Like, I
Right.
keep thinking one day I'm just going to snap. And somebody's going to say something, and I'm just going to start, like, spitting out Bible verses on there that are contradicting every single thing that they're saying. And it's like, you know, because now you can do that with the ProPresenter technology. Available for all churches near you. So,
We are not sponsored by them.
no. I just like doing fake advertisements.
So why are we giving the teenage generation in the church? Why aren't we teaching them that they can also hold us accountable? Because
don't
isn't
know.
that generation supposed to continue to help us and hold
I
us
think-
accountable?
I think
right.
This is going to get talked about when we talk about youth in the church, but
Yeah.
my opinion of that is because it goes into the whole life experience and age thing.
Right.
And
doesn't
the
I
only
get that played against me all the time, though.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is I feel like with teenagers we sit there and we say, well, you haven't been around enough and you're too immature and da-da-da.
You're too impulsive.
There are teenagers who a lot of times are a lot more clear-minded
Mhm.
than adults.
Yeah.
Because they don't have years and years of baggage.
Yeah.
I don't call it experience,
Yes.
it's baggage.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, they've narrowed their mind
Yes.
to a certain viewpoint.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Once you get to a certain age, I get told all the time, well, you're young, you don't have a whole lot of life experience. Fun fact, I have a great deal of life experiences behind my back. Like, I don't say I'm, like, all-knowing, all-wise.
No. You
Uba, or
you
whatever.
have more than what people are...
Uba?
I don't know.
Uba.
Don't look at...
Uba! I don't know, I was trying to make some up.
Simba.
I am all-knowing Simba. I am all-knowing Nala. I don't know, I'm making jokes now. But I get told quite frequently, not like by my current leaders. Like, I'm not saying it by that. But I've been told by many people, and I've had other people talk about me, like, to other people, saying, I don't have enough life experience. How am I supposed to know?
Yep.
Well, what life experience are they asking for?
Exactly.
Like, it's like, do I need to give a resume to my church?
Right.
Hi, so I went through a divorce and a mental breakdown and all of these other things, and I'm still 10. So here's my resume. Can I now, make decisions in the church?
Am I qualified to, like, voice my opinion in the church? No, because you're 10. Yeah. Like, that immediately slammed down. I've heard so many young people speak with so much wisdom.
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm going to listen to you. Like, I am going to listen to what you have to say. I have a student, and I just, like, sit down and I'm like, you are wise beyond your years. And
it's so refreshing.
It's yeah. And I'm like, that we should be listening to them too. They make up our youth program.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to talk about youth in the church.
I was about to go on a spiel. I'm like, no, save that for the youth episode. Save that for the youth episode.
No, I think that's what it comes down to is I think, and again, I know we all refer to it as experience. It's not experience, it's baggage. I mean, that's what it really comes down to is that the kids do not have the baggage that is acceptable by the church because of their age. And that's what they look at is they're ageist. Is they look and sit there and go, well, you're
ageist.
They're ageist. You sit there and look at a 16-year-old and you think stereotype. It's a judgment. You sit there and you think about the stereotypical 16-year-old or 14-year-old or whatever.
Yeah.
And say, well, you're just obsessed with your phones and your friends and stuff like that. Well, what are they doing on their phones? They may be sitting there and having devotionals and stuff on their phones.
Exactly.
You have no idea. And that was a big reason when we started this podcast.
I was high-fiving. Good job. I'm glad you raised your hand.
When we started this podcast, a big reason why we started it is because for all four of us, we were not finding things on the internet that were Christian-based from people that were our age, from our, not specific backgrounds or whatever, but that had different, unique backgrounds.
Yeah.
That were our age.
Yeah.
There's older, and, you have stuff...
Caroline.
Older.
She's only like 6 months older than me.
No.
And younger.
No, I mean, for me, you have stuff that's aimed toward kids. This goes into what we talked about, Liv, about how stuff has been kidified when we were talking about arts in the church. You either have stuff that's aimed toward kids, or you have stuff that's really, really more adult. There's nothing in between.
Right.
And that was a big thing that we wanted with this was
or
we
politically
wanted
skewed one way or the other, and it's like,
and we wanted there
bring
to be
that in, please.
Yeah, and we wanted there to be another option that was in between.
Right.
That was from four unique perspectives.
The via media.
But that was not being kidified, but was not sitting there and talking super technical terms and theological terms and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So
we wanted to be that middle ground. Of, and that's why I do as best I can with the social media. I want people, outside opinions and outside people to continue to talk to us because that holds us accountable to keep up with our facts and our truths.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And but yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think our podcast is that really great middle ground of young people can listen to it because it's clean, wholesome. We may get into some like risque topics like I was talking about in our Arts in the Christian Faith podcast, my piece about grooming and human trafficking. But kids need to know that. Teens need to know that that's a real thing. And adults need to know that too. We're this happy medium. So,
yeah.
Hey everyone. So normally this is the time when I would tell you about our sponsors, or a lack thereof, and how to reach out to us if you want to sponsor us. However, the group has decided that we are going to wait on getting sponsors. So instead, starting in March, we are going to be using this space to talk about some wonderful charities, ministries, and outreach opportunities that the Table team will be sponsoring for that month. We can't wait. In the meantime, Please continue to enjoy listening to us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, and Google Podcast. That's all for me. Bye now.
Yeah, John had his hand raised.
I'm
Go ahead, John.
wanting to step back.
Yay!
Interruption number 3.
Yeah.
I was waiting for
gave you
that.
a compliment at one of them, and I was like, I gotta pick fun at you now. You gotta give me a compliment one of these.
I eventually will.
Aww.
And
Alright,
you deserve it.
John, what did you do to say?
Okay, I'm going to step back to what I was talking about earlier.
Okay.
And this is a opinion of mine. I do not have an exact way of backing it up in the Bible.
My lawyers will be talking to you.
Okay, good. But I'm not a huge believer of having
Biblical lawyer.
a single head of a church, like within a congregation, because it talks a lot of bishops and deacons, and bishops tend to be more over regional, how they're usually done within the church nowadays. But I'm not really ever seeing like a head of a church, people that would be like speaking to the entire church at once. Whenever I'm reading through it, it tends to be people like Paul and Peter who are traveling all over the place, not in certain circuits, but they're going all over the known world at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, because you see this a lot of times and you hear about it, where the pastor gets really powerful and starts being a tyrant, essentially, of a church, which is really counter of what he's supposed to be. But and it's like, well, if you put power in one person's hands, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. So that's a little rant I have. I don't believe that there really should be a single head pastor. I think you should have your elders be your head pastors, and your elders should be the people that are within certain little communities within the church.
I like the idea of cycling through people who do sermons too.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to be able to listen to multiple people, multiple perspectives, and it gives the pastors, if we want to put it that way, more time to work on their own sermons, so that way they don't feel rushed every single week. You know? And they don't feel like everything's on their shoulders.
Yes, Olivia.
Yes, I agree with you on that. I do. I think that's good, but I think one of the issues that I find is I do like having one distinct not like I agree with what you're saying, and I kind of agree with what you're saying, like, so I'm going to play off this, like, in between ground. Like, with dance companies and dance, like, studios, we have a director and maybe, like, 1 or 2, maybe 3 associate directors, and then leaders over different programs, as far as, like, well, there's a company program, and there's, the recreational program, we have the children's program, like, there are people, and they all meet together, and that's where it goes back to, that's why we have staff meetings, is then we can all discuss, and it's not just the leaders discussing, but, one of the things that I have a hard time with when I do go and try a church is if they circulate through their pastors too frequently, I don't know who I'm going to, like, who am I going to listen to?
That makes sense.
You know what I mean? Like, as a newcomer to the church, I don't want to necessarily go to that particular sermon if it's a guest or one of the associate pastors. I want to go and hear what the actual pastor has to say, see if I agree with his theology, see if I agree with the way he communicates to me, see if I connect with that, and if I don't, I'll go try another church. But if it's constantly, like, circulating through 5 or 6, or 3 different pastors, it gets to a point where I'm like, oh, I might like this one, so I'll go see him, this month, but then I'm not going to go to church this month because this guy's doing it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
You know what I mean?
That makes sense.
So,
I guess mine is a little idealistic. But
oh,
I
absolutely,
like
and I think that's a great, but for me personally, I wouldn't be a huge fan of, I do like the one person being a leader, gives too much power, but I also want to hear that one person.
I say it could be just a speaking head of.
Yeah,
to where even the message could be theoretically brought up with the entire, like, all the elders, and it's one person delivering it constantly.
Yes, that's just
I mean, within what I'm saying, that's how that would be.
But I think that would work.
But it would still be decided amongst a group of people instead of one person being a head.
Yes.
It would be one person as the speaker, but not necessarily one head of the church.
And I think that's a fantastic idea, because again, that's why organizations have staff meetings, is because they want to hear if the leader is a leader and not a boss, they want to hear the overall opinion of the group. They want to know, how do we continue pushing forward?
So, continuing to push forward, going off of that, because that's a great segue.
I tried to help you segue.
I know, thank you.
I was watching you two communicate. I'm like, I'm going to help them segue.
Okay,
forward.
So did God give a plan? Because really the first example of the church that we know as now is in Acts, is referred to as the Acts Church. Did God give a plan for accountability from the get-go with the Acts Church?
Yes.
John.
I know he did. I
Caroline.
just can't remember.
Sorry.
We'll start with Caroline.
I spoke first.
Y'all are historic people. I'm sorry.
You got the same first item.
LOL.
I know.
Alright, so,
Cheating.
I was... I actually was trying
No cheating in class, Olivia.
I was trying to find
You were passing notes.
I was trying to find the other one that was specifically in the, later New Testament, with Paul's writings, but the one that I pulled up was Matthew 18, specifically 15 through 17, and the accountability that I'm talking about here is if your brother sins against you. And if y'all don't mind, I'm going to read it. It's the English Standard Version, which is my favorite.
Go for it, because I'm going to read one too.
I have no
great.
objection.
Okay. So, and this is
My
Jesus
lawyers
talking.
will not be contacting you.
I can't wait to meet these tiny lawyers you're talking about. If your brother sins against you...
closer, tiny lawyer.
I'm horrified. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. So there's stage 1 of accountability. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take 1 or 2 others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Now, I don't think I know. Now,
That's what we did when we read it last night. We were like, oh, that hurts.
I still don't think that means all of a sudden you just hate that person forever. You just...
I mean, the Bible said he's a Gentile and a tax collector.
Yes.
But a
Let's
Gentile
think
and a
about
tax
who just
collector
wrote
can be brought into...
Yes, but who wrote the book of Matthew?
I
Matthew
know,
the tax collector.
I'm making jokes.
No, but it's used because it's an emphasis. It's supposed to hurt.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
supposed to sit there and you be like,
Exactly.
ooh, I don't want to be treated like that.
Yeah,
That's the whole
yeah.
point.
That
it's
verse
not
is
just-
supposed to be holding you accountable.
Yeah.
And it's not
in that
just,
sense.
I don't want to be treated like that. I don't want my brother to be treated like that.
Exactly.
And so I believe that this is maybe not just the plan, but a definite plan about how you should do this. Because God does not say, everybody rush and charge this guy or girl, whatever, they're doing a bad thing, let's rush them. No. Start in private. Keep it in private if you have to escalate to the next bit. And then only if private does not help, that's when you take it to the whole congregation. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I've seen that before being used, I don't want to say for accountability, but for proselytizing purposes. I heard a gentleman yesterday talking about how it was either Mormons or, no, it was Jehovah's Witnesses. How one guy came to his door, and then they were talking, and he was like, hey, so I'll give you my stuff, and then I'll take your stuff. And so I think the guy actually said yes, and they swapped information. And then, a few weeks later, the Jehovah's Witness brought a few more people, and he invited them in, and they talked, and I think they exchanged their stuff, and then I think it happened one more time with even more people, and then after that, they left him alone. So it's like, hey, we tried the biblical method. This guy isn't just going to come with us. But, it's like, I guess I can kind of see how that would work for proselytizing, but that still feels like ganging up on people. So, no, that's supposed to be for accountability in the church. So, I just think it's interesting that they even tried that method. Because to me, it's like, this doesn't make me want to go to your church. This kind of scares me. Is this the mafia? What's going on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I
They're
know.
in the family.
As you point to your nose of heritage.
Yeah, I
You
was
come
told that this is
today.
what you say. This is what you do.
I know, but nobody
Yeah.
can see you doing that.
Come on the
They
day
don't
of
need
my
to know.
daughter's wedding.
They don't even need to know I have family.
We've mentioned that you're
I was-
Italian before.
I was
Doesn't
going
mean I
off
have family.
Every Italian has family. This is the way it is.
This is true. Well, I'm going to refer back to our first podcast on this particular. If you don't mind me like jumping in really quick,
Yeah, go.
I'm going to
No,
refer back
I've
to
said
our
my piece.
first podcast as far as like where this method of accountability comes, because it is biblical. You know, you go to the person individually, and it also kind of touches on our conflict one as well. You go to the person, you know, individually. That escalates. What? Escalates. That one.
Escalade.
It escalates, and then you know you bring a little bit more of the church in as like mediators, as like non-biased, both sides of the party want to figure this out. It just goes down to conflict. So accountability and conflict can go hand in hand. They don't have to go hand in hand. My question is, to what extent does accountability reach the same breaking point as the conflict method you were talking about?
Ooh. John, take it away.
You're talking about using last, I imagine.
I'm talking about using last. Here we are again. John, how are you? To what extent, because I have my answer, but to what extent do you then either leadership has to break away from the stubbornness of the church trying to be over accountable, or to what extent does the church actually have to break away and say, we're trying to hold you accountable, we have biblical standing, we have, you know, evidence on why we're holding you accountable, it's just not working.
Well, I mean, and last would be for if you're
My
the
ear itches. My
But,
ear itches.
sorry.
It's my deaf side, so it doesn't matter.
last would be used theoretically by the person who the church has an issue with.
Right.
So that's, you know, if you have a hardened heart in that regard, you're not going to solve the problem. You're not going to change. So, though that's how you should handle it as the person that has the problem brought to you, doesn't mean that that's what will be brought to you. You know, that you will reciprocate that. Now I'm jumping from what you were saying to what Caroline was saying earlier.
See, look, I'm a perfect person for segues.
But it almost sounds like the basis for excommunication.
Until people just decided to use it willy-nilly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Now say now. I mean, it's been abused.
Yes.
Again, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Yes.
But excommunication, there's some things within the Catholic faith that I'm not in agreement with. Does not mean.
Bless you.
Excuse me.
Okay, Ben.
That does not
I
mean
knew
that.
that was going to happen eventually.
You get to hear how cute you sneeze.
It's not cute, it's weird.
But I mean, there is biblical basis for it, which initially I just thought it was, oh, we're this big organization, we don't like you, get out. I'll admit I was ignorant on that until I was reading that particular passage. You look like you have something to say to that.
No, I was just listening.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying not to have a runny nose.
I'm gonna say there's a website that I found last night. It's called desiringgod.org, which I love that. And they said that
They got .org? I want .org.
they made the comment that the pastor and the elders, their leadership does not replace the congregation of believers as the body, and with final authority under the Lord. That's a direct quote from them, and I love that. I love the fact that it says that, because it was talking about how the congregation needs to be submissive and needs to be respectful to the leaders, but that the leadership, going into that, does not replace the congregation.
Proper checks and balances.
Exactly. And the verse that they used to support that, and I'm not gonna read the before and after because it is a different sections, like an ADD moment in Acts where they're like, okay, next topic. But I will give kind of a pretext. It's
just the way Luke writes.
It is. But so it's talking about choosing people to go see Paul and Barnabas. And it's in Acts 15:22, and I'm reading out of the NIV, and it says, "Then the apostles and elders with the whole church decided to choose some of their own men and send them to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas. I like the fact that it's specific in there, that the leaders did it, but then also the church had a say in it. And I think that that's one thing that we have to remember, is that at the end of the day, pastors and elders, they're not our masters, they're the servants. And it's like what you said, Liv, earlier about, as leaders, they should not be getting pushed up by the congregation. They should be at the bottom pushing the congregation up.
Yes.
Or this is the way I prefer to see it, because I've actually seen someone illustrate this. It's like in ancient Egypt, how we have this big block, and you've got the workers in front that are pulling the block with this big rope. The boss, a bad boss, will be sitting on top in a lawn chair with a whip, cracking everybody along. A leader will be the one in front of everybody on the rope, guiding everybody along.
Yep.
So that's what we want, because it shows that we're all in this together. I'm not making the load heavier for you. I am actively helping to lighten the load of everyone while showing everybody where to go. So.
Yep. So I'm going to take this moment to give a shout out, because I didn't do it at the beginning.
Yes, we need to do.
We need to do shout outs.
So our first shout out for this particular podcast goes out to Z_Hope2Life on Instagram. She did a shout out for us right before our first podcast aired in January. And I gave this, whole thing where I was like, hey, give us a shout out. On your Instagram, and we'll give you one back on our podcast. So Z_Hope2Life, thank you so much for your support. And we greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Woohoo!
Yay!
To wrap stuff up, sorry, I'm having to look at my notes. How can we begin the discussion to change the accountability within the church? Liv?
I'm taking a guess. Liv wants to.
I'm gonna start with Liv first.
Why?
Unless you want me to go
Please
first,
do,
Liv.
because my notes I have an embarrassing sentence.
Mine's so opinionated, though.
Well,
Do you want me to start,
you've
Liv,
already
and let you
said
get yourself?
You've already established that that's what you do.
I know.
that you have opinions.
I have all the opinions. I think we need to collect all the loudmouth, opinionated human beings.
Yes.
And put them at the front line of the war and say, be free.
So, and you're going to be in front of them?
Yeah. I mean, when I see something, I feel like, if God's putting it on my heart to say something, I'm going to do it, there's going to be some slight worry there. Like, I've had to do it before. I mean, that odd AM, I had to do it. I was a part of leadership. I was in leadership as the associate director of the second company. People were coming to me saying, hey, this is something we're struggling with. This is something that we feel the congregation or community, that's what we, it doesn't matter. As a dance company, could be, seeing the same structure as a church. This is what we're seeing. We're not liking it. Is there something you can do as a leader because we don't have a voice? And it's like, yes, I will talk to leadership. And then when, I turned around, there were, only a few people left behind me. They all, there's a good chunk of people who are like, change my mind, don't want to be about that because there's a lot of confrontation there.
They left cartoon outlines of themselves in dust as they
Yeah.
flew away.
Which, nothing against those people, they're, but, we put those people who are not afraid to speak up at the front line and encourage those people who want to support that and who have those opinions. They need to stand behind those people too and take that, leap of faith of, if we all band together, maybe there can be some change and accountability.
Yeah.
Like I said, no one.
I literally
but a
said the
few
same
people.
thing in my notes, which was start making noise and start campaigning and
I
start.
can make noise.
We all know you can make noise, Olivia.
Yeah, I mean, yes,
Thanks,
we know.
Sean.
We'll just stand Olivia up in the middle of church and let her just make noise.
Can I put it be on John's shoulders?
Yes.
So
yes.
that people can actually see you for once?
Oh, bird!
She just
not
wants to do
kind.
some bronze
I'm so proud of you. That was a really good dance reference.
Yay! Did everyone hear what I said?
No.
I did.
I
I
didn't.
was very happy.
I said, no, people can see her. She just needs to do some grand jetés.
That was beautiful.
C'est parce que je parle français.
You spoke directly to my heart, but not that sentence because I don't know French. I only know terms.
I was a little obsessed with ballet when I was a kid.
Yeah?
I got some ballet VHS tapes, and I have
Oh,
some
that's cool.
hilarious home videos of me where I have this big sort of circular living room with these two little areas that you could consider wings of the stage, and my mom has home video of me in my little tutu, and she has on like Nutcracker, and so I'm sitting there waiting for my cue,
music.
and then I come on when the music is supposed to come on, and then I dance and then I go back. And I wait for my cue, and then I come on.
Oh my gosh, that is the cutest thing. I love Nutcracker, but I'm in post-Nutcracker feels.
It's mostly just me just sort of twirling around the room over and over and over, and I really want to take that footage, speed it up, and put, like, Flight of the Bumblebee over it, so you see me just going bam, 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 as I just circle around the room. So I am
epic.
I just need to get all of our home videos converted, though, so that way I can have it on the computer. But, yeah, so there was our little weirdness.
Story time with Caroline.
We haven't had
Incidentals.
one yet.
There we go.
Incidental story time with Caroline. No, sorry, where were we? Because I did have something I wanted
Speaking
to...
up.
Oh, okay.
And not being afraid to stand up behind those speaking up.
So, thank y'all for staying with us, because this is a slightly longer one, because I do have something I wanted to mention here. Within a congregation that I know, they have tried to speak up, but I know we've mentioned some ageist stuff here. The people who are trying to speak up are the older folks, and the people who are being spoken to are some of the, I don't want to call them older, they're just sort of straddling that awkward line where they're almost the older folks, but they're not. But they have negative feelings towards the older folks, and so they don't want to listen to the older folks, even when there are also younger folks who are telling them the same thing, and it's like, So maybe I'd like just a little elaboration. How would y'all say if you've got something like that going on?
I had a word. Hold on. It's going to come back to me. Well, So it goes back to my comment on not making excuses for the older generation, but just as equally not making excuses for the younger generation. Mm-hmm. Just that to me sounds like an excuse. Well, I don't want to listen because they're older than me.
But I mean, if the leaders are doing it, that's what I mean. The older generation is trying to talk to the leaders about it, but the leaders are not listening to the older generation because they don't want to.
It's time for them to leave.
No,
it's time for them to leave leadership, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just my blunt honesty.
No,
but that goes into an ageist thing again.
Yeah.
Because you think about, and I know we're referring to elders as in the elders of the church. I'm talking about elders as in elderly people. If you sit there and you have elders who typically kind of just go with the flow. I mean, they're usually stereotypically, and this is a judgment on my part, and I'm just saying that from the get-go.
My lawyers will be talking to you.
I know. Stereotypically, we think of elder folks who sit there and just complain and whatever else, right?
Those millennials.
Those
always texting.
Sitting on the, front porch. The stereotype.
Yeah.
Why would we listen to them then? Well, their memory is failing. Well, they don't know what they're talking about. Well, they're not up to date. But that's what I'm saying. There's an ageist part in the younger, and it's like you have to be between like 30 and like 60 for us to listen to you.
Yeah. Otherwise,
that's the thought.
We hate you. If you're young or if you're super old, you guys are too judgmental because you're old. You guys are too judgmental because you're young and stupid. We only listen to this amount.
Yeah.
And really, our favorite spot's 35 to about 45.
Yeah. I was about to say, and even in there, we have a very specific group that we're willing to listen to. But if just to go back to your original statement, not to cut you off, I don't.
No, you're fine.
Is if the leadership's not listening, congregation should leave.
Yeah.
And if the congregation isn't listening, leadership just go. Find. I would say go to a congregation that's going to listen to you. I'm sorry, but that's why I left ADM. And I don't care if people know that. I left because leadership was not taking into account what their congregation was having issues with. So I said, okay, I can't be a part of this anymore because I won't be associated with that kind of leadership. Not happening.
Right.
Now, this is going to be something that I talked with Jordan about last night. We have that viewpoint because where we're at, you can leave from where we're at right now, and within a 15-mile radius, you probably hit 10 churches.
I mean, throw a pebble and there's another church.
Yeah.
We're in the South. Bible Belt.
Yeah. But if you go, let's just say you're in a different country, and there's one church for hundreds of miles, and you don't have a car.
Russia.
it's not quite to the point where you can just leave.
Right.
What would you then suggest for those type of people?
That is when I insert what I said about the purpose of the church. That's when you group up a bunch of people. You start your home church.
Hey,
you let the Spirit completely
That's what I said, house
lead
church.
you. House church. Yeah. You completely, and that the Lord will lead you and the Lord will guide you into a direction. But if that's the season you're in and you're not agreeing with those leaders and like, if you're just not agreeing with them because you want to be difficult, like, okay, come on. Like, grow up. It's time to grow up.
There's problems on both sides.
Absolutely. But if you know deep down that leadership is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and there's all these faults and all these, examples, and you have this evidence against them, go start your own home church. Get in the Word, come together. That could be a season of life, and that's what I said at the purpose of the church. I'm in a season of life where right now God is moving me from, away from being in my own church between him and I, and moving my fiance and I into a church together. I was in that season. It's okay. Church is church is not the building; it's the people.
Yep.
I say you're hitting on exactly what I was about to hit on. Was it doesn't say a church has a steeple. A church is a body of believers. Theoretically, what we have here,
it just has to have the people.
Caroline.
Church. Here is the steeple.
Open the doors,
and
there's
there
all
are
the
the people.
Oh, my
Close
goodness.
the doors. Here is the steeple. Open the church. Where'd all the people go? Hey, that's how I learned it.
but
I just learned the first half.
theoretically, what we have right here is a church.
Yep.
We are a very small church. We are a very small body of people, believers that get together and talk about God with one
I
another.
need to speak to the leadership of this church, though.
All right, honey.
Speak to the voices in your head.
Look in a mirror.
That was good. I'm proud of you.
Good job, John.
But I'm going to use that as a segue for my turn of talking about how to change.
This one's getting really long, John.
I know. For instance, because you vote your elders and your your deacons, however you want to phrase it, and they need to stand up in a special session and tell the congregation who they are, a little bit about them, so that the congregation frequently. Because as a church that me, Jordan, and Olivia went to, as Olivia said, she didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And we voted twice in the time that we were there, and I only knew one.
I didn't know who I was voting for.
But that's the point.
I didn't vote.
But
I don't know.
there needs to be like a town hall, a town hall. I'm using air quotes here for those who cannot see me, which is just about everybody. But have a town hall to where they can...
Are you suggesting that somebody is retroactively telepathic?
Well,
I'm
y'all
sorry,
are
Joe,
here.
I can see him.
Can you
I
not
can't.
see me, Caroline?
where
Are you
your
blind?
Glasses?
I don't need them. We're this close up.
But have that
Didn't
town
see
hall.
the air quotes apparently.
I'm sorry, it's just the way he said it.
Continue your thoughts.
That way that they can be educated on the person that they will be voting for. To me, that just seems like the best idea.
I agree.
And Olivia, is there anybody who on Instagram made any extra questions?
No, we did not have any questions for group text today.
Nope.
Oh, we do have a question!
Oh, we do have one question.
Yay!
We
Go
have one
for it.
question. Hold on, I
People
can't
love
see it. Okay. This is from easy.238.
Okay.
That is their username. I'm not going to say who they are. I'm just going to username it.
Okay.
How do you stay committed to whatever it is with conviction, but without condemnation? Shoot. I said a weird word.
And here I thought it was a theological term I hadn't heard before.
No, it's
Say that again.
I'll ask this again. Again, this is easy.238. How do you stay committed to whatever it is with conviction, but without condemnation? So how do you stay committed to what you believe is true without feeling condemned by the other side?
And this
That's a good
relates
question.
to accountability?
In the church? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I can answer that.
Go
Here,
for it.
please.
Okay,
I need an example.
So, I'll just continue to use IJM as an example.
Go for it.
I was convicted to stand up in front of the directors and say my piece and to speak my truth. I won't go into detail amongst that, but there was some hurt. But I felt convicted to speak up amongst the group and say what was bothering me about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And it was turned around and thrown in my face. I was told that I was not a trustworthy person in the group. I was told that my commitment level was no longer valued because my yeses needed to be yeses, my no's needed to be no, and I needed to be committed to leadership and not side with the group. And that was condemnation on me. Like, he flipped everything around to make it my fault at the end of the day. I was holding him accountable to the guidelines within our contract, and I would even show him, like, you said this, but you're not doing it. Like, we in our contract said if we had a show on Saturday, we had Monday off. Well, he wasn't upholding that. So I brought it to him. I was like, this is what you said, this is what I've signed. And he would turn it around and flip it. Well, I would see the show, and it would not be, y'all's dances would not be good enough, so you needed to come in for rehearsal. How is that, my fault? So my answer to you is stick true to your guns. Don't back down. If you feel like the Lord has led you and has convicted you to say or do an act on speaking up for accountability, then speak up, but accept whatever consequence, whether it be condemnation or praise. You gotta accept that consequence no matter what, but don't let that skew your heart nor your faith in the Lord. Caroline.
Good little historical tidbit. So, there was a lady from the early days of my denomination, and she was one of the early leaders in the church, and they would regularly have general conference meetings of, like, once the church had grown more, people coming together, people sharing ideas, people making sure everybody was on the same page, and that sort of thing. Well, there was a really famous conference that happened in 1888, and there were these two young people, like we've been talking about, who are really going in deep in the study of sanctification and justification, and they felt like, we've done all this study, we want to share our research for you, and they were basically laughed out of the convocation, which, I mean, to me, that shows how deeply legalistic a lot of the church leadership had gotten at that time. Now, this particular woman who I was talking about, her name is Ellen White, she went up in front of everybody, because she was a regular speaker, and she said, you guys have shamed the Holy Spirit today. These guys came and presented some present truth here, and you guys just completely laughed him out. And so they shipped her off to Australia.
Wow.
And here's the funny thing. She helped start a lot of churches there, and so my denomination has a big presence there. She was able to eventually go back to the United States, but it's like she accepted what happened, and God led her to continue to share His love with others. She wrote some very powerful books while she was in Australia, which I love, which talk about Jesus in such a tender, compassionate way.
I'm in a headlock. Someone save me.
You're not in a headlock.
He's choking me.
I'm not choking you either. One hand on each shoulder is not
They
choking you.
can't see you.
So I feel like it goes along with what you're saying,
Absolutely.
though, and that you have to stick with your truth no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Because God can still use that, whatever happens,
Absolutely.
to His good. Because sometimes it means you just need to get the heck out of Dodge.
Yep.
And I mean, if you stay, you need to stay. If you need to leave, that's okay. You just escaped a toxic situation that was going to further bring you.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, y'all.
We had group text.
Yay!
Oh.
We're so happy, guys. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
All right, John, lead us
No,
out.
I was talking to our listeners, John.
I know.
Okay. Lead us out, John.
Thank you for listening, Call to the Table. We were glad that you were able to listen to us today on whatever medium you were able to.
Medium.
Just watching.
But you looked concerned.
Just watching.
You have resting, interesting face. And I'm never sure what it is that you're thinking.
RIF. I like that. Riff. I got riff.
You have a riff.
Resting,
Got a riff.
interesting face.
If you ever have any questions or prayer requests, anything of that nature, shout outs at Call to the Table Pod on Instagram and Facebook, or call to the table at gmail.com.
Thank you.
And please join us next time as we talk about women preaching in the church.
Bye.
Bye.
Talking about Jesus.